Please be seated. Today we enter into the solemnity of Holy Week. It's a time when we experience our faith, as you all just felt in the reading of the Passion narrative. We allow ourselves to be swept up into the story. The events of the past become present to us now. On Palm Sunday, our worship has twin themes. Our service takes us from one end of the emotional spectrum to the other. We begin with shouts of praise, Hosanna in the highest. We acclaim a king, but we end with curses. Crucify him. Our hearts soar with joy as the Messiah enters Jerusalem on the little colt. The atmosphere is joyful. The day feels like a festival. But just a few moments later, everything changes. The one we have just celebrated and acclaimed is captured and tortured. Our hearts are broken as he labors under the crushing weight of the cross. Why do we juxtapose these two very different events on the same day? Why not concentrate on the entry into Jerusalem today and then the cross on Good Friday? So today we're going to explore these two intertwined themes of Palm Sunday, and we'll discover why the triumphal entry into Jerusalem and the cross are inextricably linked, and why it's essential that we hold them together. And I want to talk about this link through part of the story that is very rarely talked about. This person receives the highest possible praise from Jesus, but is almost completely overlooked in churches today. The woman with the alabaster jar is at the start of it all. Her story beautifully illustrates both meanings of Palm Sunday. This woman comes to the dinner at the house of Simon the leper in Bethany. She brings a fine jar of alabaster. That's a white, translucent, soft rock mineral that can be carved into ornate works of art. It was prized in the ancient world, just as it is today. Inside her jar was one of the most precious and valuable commodities on earth. Spikenard, a fragrant oil. It's used in religious ceremonies and used to anoint kings. Two scriptures in the Old Testament make reference to this oil being used for kings' anointing. And it isn't just ancient ritual, it continues to this day. We all saw it just last year at King Charles's coronation. You'll recall at that very central part of the ceremony, they bring in those ornate screens to shield the new king from view. And you'll recall the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, anointed Charles with the holy oil. That oil was brought in from Jerusalem, from the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church. And it symbolizes the divine right of kings to rule. So this woman brings a jar of oil fit for a king's coronation and pours it all out onto Jesus' head. No wonder some of the people there were taken aback and scolded her. Her gesture was extravagant. It was opulent. A year's wages poured out in one beautiful gesture, filling the room with scent, flowing onto Jesus' hair, penetrating into his scalp, to to prepare him for a crown. Of course, we know Jesus will not wear a crown of gold, but a crown of thorns. Instead of perfumed oil, blood will soon pour down his head. Jesus tells the naysayers around the table, "Let her alone, for she has performed a good service for me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body for its burial." It's so interesting. Unlike the 12 disciples, this woman believed everything that Jesus had been saying. She understood his message, and this gesture was the one way that she could show him the depth of her emotion. And Jesus in turn sees her. He sees her beautiful intent, and he stands up for her when all the others criticize her gift. And they're trying to kind of pit her beautiful act of devotion against social justice work for those in need. And Jesus is having none of it. He affirms both of those as worthy endeavors. Caring for the poor is expected, and it's taught in Torah. But he also sees her gesture, as extravagant as it is, as immensely significant, even prophetic. It's a sign not only that he is the Messiah, but of all that is going to happen to him. So the woman with the alabaster jar anoints Jesus as king. She understands he is a different kind of king with a different kind of kingdom. He doesn't ride into Jerusalem on a heavy horse with armor and weapons. He doesn't impose his reign at the point of a sword. Instead of anointing him to take up power, she anoints him for death. And Jesus gives her his blessing, telling the whole group, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her. St. Paul echoes how very different Jesus is in his letter to the Philippians. We read, he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And we see that this is just consistent with who Jesus is. He lives his whole life for others, for the sick, for the outcasts, for all of the people in those massive crowds, for his confused disciples that never kind of catch on to what he's saying. His love extends beyond every boundary, even death itself. The Creator, the Messiah, the Son of David, the rightful King of the Jews, willingly empties himself and humbles himself for our sake, for your sake. Jesus' triumphal entry and the cross forever intertwined. Just as the woman with the alabaster jar pours out his holy oil, Jesus pours out his love onto all of us. So today, this Palm Sunday, may her act of devotion be your invitation to experience the power of Holy Week. May we remember her gift, just as Jesus said, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her.